Hello and welcome to United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey. We are here once again on both Twitch and YouTube with our Saturday presentation. Uh, Big shout out to everyone who has joined us in so far tonight. I see a Biting Ohm's Law and uh, was that Steph in chat? Um, but I do want to encourage anyone who's new here to go check us out at uacnj.org. It's where you're going to find all the information about us as an astronomy organization, as well as information on our member clubs, because we're actually a club made up of other astronomy clubs with a goal of bringing our love of science, space, and astronomy to as many people as we possibly can. In addition, on our website, you'll also find a list of all our upcoming talks as well as our past talks. Uh, it's a great resource to use if you have any questions. There's links there as well to get a hold of us. In addition, you can check us out on our social media pages, our Facebook. We have Instagram and a Discord server, all great places to follow us, find out what we're doing that week, as well as any special events or other fun astronomy things that might be occurring. Um, all, Also, great places to get in touch with us, share your astronomy images, or even just ask questions or show off your brand new astronomy rig. Uh, you can also we are blah 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 blah. Helps if your tongue is not wrapped around your eye teeth so you can see where you're trying to talk. Uh, as always, we are a nonprofit, uh, so any donations made do help keep our bills paid, as well as helps us keep offering these free public programs, uh, and allows us to continue as an organization. So, you're not here to hear me ramble on poorly. You're actually here for our talk tonight, which is a visit to the sun and the ionosphere, given by Ron Wilcox, who is KF7ZN on ham radio. He was licensed in ham radio in 1984, thanks to Don, who is KA7T. Uh, Ron had a career with Mountain Bell and is currently a RN case manager with Intermountain Health Select Health in Utah. He is an active member and officer with multiple clubs and association, including the NASA Citizen Science, HAMSci, Utah DX Association, which I'm not sure what that is. I'm sure he will tell me soon enough, and the Mobile Amateur Radio Awards Club, among others. Ron is an active volunteer examiner, serving on convention committees and as an assistant emergency coordinator. He is a member of the Amateur Radio Relay League and HAMSci Speakers Bureau, with frequent presentations to clubs and conventions, such as the one tonight. Um, he has been published in Spectrum Monitor, which was a feature cover article, and National Contest Journal, CQ Magazine, and a regular contributor for the HAMSci newsletter, and co-author for Frontiers in Astronomy and Space Sciences. He loves being with his family while being active in church, music, family history, and fishing. For more information, he has and pictures, you can go to the website he's at, which is qrz.com. And with that, here's Ron.
Thank you very much, Kim. So appreciate that warm introduction. To start off with, DX stands for distance, and in ham radio, there's a very active part where people like to try to work as many of the countries and entities as possible, and that's called DXing. And so this association in Utah specializes in ham radio contesting and ham radio DXing. The QRZ.com is a website where ham radio operators will put together kind of like a page, If you go to there and put in my call sign of KF7ZN, it'll bring up quite a bit more information. So, a welcome tonight for the invitation with the United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey. Let's stay there for a second. So, where this presentation came from is, and I do other presentations, is that a few years ago, I had some ham radio operators that said that they were having a problem understanding the more technical presentations on the ionosphere and radio propagation. So I put this together for those ham radio operators. I've given it at quite a few conventions and clubs across the nation. Um, then I had a friend of mine, a ham radio operator, I think somebody in Connecticut, but he said, "Oh, I have an astronomy club. I'm also an astronomer." And I thought, yeah, this would probably work for an astronomy club. And so it was very well received. And I've done quite a few astronomy clubs. With that, please realize I'm not a scientist. I'm not a professor. I'm just a layperson. So please don't be disappointed if you ask technical questions and you get a blank look or I say, I have no idea. This again is intended as a basic introduction to some of these concepts. For some of you, it might be really basic, but most people, even a couple of college clubs that have asked me to present, have said that they have found something that was new or interesting. I really hope that that's the case for you. Kim mentioned HamSci. HamSci is Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation. It is a branch of the NASA Citizen Science Group. We do scientific research. We develop new technologies. We have educational opportunities like what I'm doing here. And the main study is the upper atmosphere and space physics. I won't go into more than that. We have a website. We have hundreds of people involved. We study eclipses and a lot of research into so many different areas. I would encourage you, if you're interested in this, to go into our website and check it out. So I've entitled this A Visit to the Sun and the Ionosphere. And as I emphasized earlier, this is a basic introduction. When we start, let's start with the sun. The sun is 93 million miles from the Earth. 1,300,000 Earths could fit inside the sun. And the sun makes up 99.86% of the mass in the solar system. We have basically in the sun, you've got a core where hydrogen is being fused into helium. This creates a tremendous amount of heat and energy. When we talk about the sun, we have to define what plasma is. Plasma is a gas that is made of ionized or charged particles. Now, this energy that I just alluded to in the center of the sun, in the core, it can take 100,000 years for this energy to make its way up to the surface of the sun. Some of the temperatures we're looking at, core temperature is about 29 million degrees. The surface temperature maxes out at about 18,000 degrees. And then above the surface of the sun, it heats back up to 2 million degrees. And that, as I understand it, the reason for that increase in temperature has to do with the magnetic lines and their influence. Coming off of the wind, we have something called, or off of the sun, we have something called the solar wind. This is a continuous flow, mainly made up of protons, helium nuclei, and some electrons. It expands outward from the sun in all directions. It's a magnetized plasma, and we have two kinds of solar wind. We have the slow solar wind that pokes along and takes about 4 days to get to Earth. And we have the fast solar wind that can take about 2 days. This can be important for ham radio operators. Usually the slow solar wind tends to come from the middle latitudes of the sun, and it pokes along at 200 miles per second. The fast solar wind tends to be found coming from coronal holes, and this is found more at the poles of the sun and the higher latitudes. As you can see from the arrows where the dark masses are, those are coronal holes, and that's where that fast solar wind tends to come from. This is an artist's conception of what it's like. All of this solar wind comes up against the Earth. It hits some of the protective layers around the Earth. It's reflected around it, and then goes on out into the solar system. We luckily on Earth have some protective mechanisms, magnetosphere and other things like that other planets don't have, which can protect us from a lot of the things from the sun. So for a ham radio operator, sunspots are very important. When we see an increase in sunspots, we see an increase in propagation, and we are able to talk easier and use higher frequencies to be able to work some of the distances. Now, back in the early times, 1600s, 1700s, in the press, some of the early theories about sunspots included a couple of editorials that made fun and said they were pretty sure it was just on a speck on a telescope, that the astronomers needed to clean their telescopes better. And then the scientists began to weigh in. Some of the theories was that the sun was hot and the mountain peaks were so high that they were cold, and when they would peek through and we could see them, that's how they would appear. Another theory was that the sun was completely shrouded in clouds, and then the clouds would part and have holes, and that's when we would see sunspots. Ham radio operators, as I said, love sunspots. The first recorded anything in writing that we have is from the Chinese at 700 BC, and they described sunspots on the sun. Obviously not in very much detail, but they were the first that we're aware of that did that. We have what's called a sunspot cycle. This is an 11-year cycle discovered by Heinrich Schwab. And a complete cycle is 22 years, but you have an 11-year cycle, almost like a sine wave, where you'll have it come to a maximum and a minimum, and then another maximum, and then another minimum. The most intense cycle on record was one called Cycle 19, and this was in 1954 is when it started. It was incredibly intense, and ham radio operators could work pretty much anywhere in the world, 24 hours a day, with a very, very modest antenna. One of the smallest cycles in the last 100 years is Cycle 24, and that was the cycle just before the one we're in now. It was one of the smallest ones. Now, the solar cycle that we are in right now is cycle number 25. During 24, ham radio operators, because it was so small, so difficult to get propagation, we were all looking forward to 25, wondering how strong it would be, which is a completely different presentation on that. Here's 400 years of sunspots. Many of you might have heard of the Maunder minimum back from about 1650 to maybe about 1710, 1720, where there was basically for years almost zero sunspots observed. There's some interesting research that I'm not really familiar with, where the temperatures in Europe were incredibly cold and below normal for an extended period of time. There was some thought that there might be a relationship between that because it coincides so neatly with this minimum, but I haven't seen anything either way, just with my limited knowledge of it. But it was interesting to see that. We had another minimum at the beginning of 1800 And then you can see some of the maximums that have occurred. And then you can see 1950, that cycle number 19, where it was significantly higher than anything else before it. So where are they located? Well, when we have a solar minimum, most of the sunspots will be in the middle latitudes. As we progress through the cycle and start to go towards maximum, sunspots will start to move towards the solar equator. And when we talk about a solar equator, we're talking about more of a magnetic region than we are like a geographical on the Earth. And sunspots will move east to west as the sun rotates, and they are visible for about 13 days. Now, an important point to understand is that the sun rotates at different speeds. Near the equator, it's about 25 days. In the middle latitudes, it's about 28 days. And up on the poles, it's 35 days. And this is important because it leads to the formation of sunspots. So how do they develop? Well, there's a mass of magnetic fields that are under the surface of the sun. And these magnetic fields are longitudinal, so meaning they run north to south. Because the rotation speeds, as you just saw, are different between the equator and the poles, this starts to cause a bending and a distortion of those fields, leading to the fields beginning to change to an east to west direction. When this happens, there is a tremendous amount of energy that is being formed, and then eventually they will break through to the surface of the sun. And when this happens, you'll have huge magnetic loops forming in that region. Now, here's kind of a picture of that. You can see in the first one, the magnetic fields are going north and south. In the second one, you can see they're starting to bend. And in the third one, you can see significant bending. And again, this releases this has a lot of energy in it. And now here you can see a magnetic field that has actually come through the surface. Now we have a sunspot. And size and lifetime. Sunspots go from small ones, a few hundred miles across, to some of the most massive can be up to 250,000 miles across. And their lifetime, it can go from a few days to several months. Some of them will rotate into view, and about 28 days later, they disappear, and then they reappear again until eventually they disappear completely. Why are sunspots dark? Well, they are 30% cooler than their surroundings, but a very important point is that while they may be visibly dark, they are radio loud, which for us ham radio operators, this is significant and major. I'm not going to touch on this very much, but in ham radio, we use a number called the smooth sunspot number. Your daily and monthly numbers are very spiky, as you saw from that one chart that I showed you, the 400 years. So they will use data 6 months behind, 6 months after, come up with a number called the smooth sunspot number. And many times this is how a solar cycle is defined. Back to sunspots. Their increase in numbers is associated with an increase in ultraviolet radiation. This leads to improved propagation. And we'll talk about that later on. Because of this, the higher bands, and what I mean by higher bands is for ham radio operators, the higher frequency, shorter wavelength, opens up. So we have a favorite frequency for DXing called the 10-meter frequency, about 28 megahertz. And this is, during solar minimum, it is not open very much at all. When we have solar maximum, you can make contact sometimes way into the night and early in the morning. And this is related to that UV radiation coming into the ionosphere. However, it is actually the area around the sunspot where the UV radiation comes from, but usually we just talk about the sunspots and the increase in ultraviolet radiation. We have another number we like to use in ham radio called the solar flux. So this was discovered about a year and a half after World War II, and it was found that this radio energy at 10.7 centimeters was closely correlated to the number of sunspots present. Now, they are not directly, as far as I know, directly physically related to each other. But when this 10.7 meter flux or solar flux goes up, generally within a day, we will see the sunspots go up. And so the number of the solar flux is a nice indicator, another tool for long distance radio communication. The solar flux does not cause any ionization in the ionosphere. It's reported daily. Typical values can go from 60 to 300. In the last cycle, they just stayed low the whole time. Conditions typically are not very good if they're low. And we'll go on to the next one. Now, let's talk about some of the storms, some of the energy that leaves the sun that affects us. We're going to describe them and then talk about some of their effects on the earth. And these will sometimes be interchanged, particularly in the press. You will see these interchanged incorrectly. Let's start with the solar flare. Solar flare, brief, intense, sometimes extremely intense. And it's a high energy eruption with very little material. It is mainly made up of X-rays, radio bursts, and particles. And it's caused by a tangling or reorganizing those magnetic field lines that I showed you that are near the sunspots and related to the sunspots. Sometimes they will tangle or cross, and this will cause that vast amount of energy to shoot out one of these flares. A solar flare is very fast. It's almost at the speed of light, and it reaches Earth in 8 to 10 minutes. So we really don't have a warning on a solar flare. A solar flare can affect power grids, satellites, radio communication, and it's also affected with the other one that we're going to talk about called a CME. This is a coronal mass ejection, but a solar flare is mainly high energy. Solar flares are classified. The smallest is a C flare. Doesn't really impact propagation very much. And then you have an M, and then you have an X. And when you get to M, and in particular X, you're now going to have an adverse impact of propagation and to other things, as we're going to see in a minute. Like the Richter scale, each letter from C to M to X is a 10-fold increase in energy output. And a solar flare, each one of those scales, like an M can go M1 to M9. X-class flares can go higher than 9. It's kind of unusual. In 2003, there was a solar flare so powerful that it overloaded all of the sensors on the satellites measuring it. It's interesting on NASA and some of the other sites, they just show this flare and the satellite, and then all of a sudden it's just all fuzz as it overloads it. The sensors on the satellites generally will go up to about X15 to X17. So the one thing we know about 2003 is that it was over X17. It was estimated that it was an X35 to X45, which there's been very, very few of those. Now, let's go to the coronal mass ejection. That's a CME. This is a large explosion of plasma and magnetic field. A CME can eject billions of tons in each ejection. They can take 2 to 3 days to reach Earth, and this is your cause for your auroras. This is a picture of a CME, and you can see the magnetic lines, almost like a slinky if you were to look at it from the side on. And then this gives you an idea of the size of this. There's the approximate size of Earth in relation to this particular CME. So let's talk for a second about auroras. The first written record, again, comes from the Chinese at 8000 BC. There are many references from them about dragons in the sky. In fact, some of the research when I read about this was that they would actually go out and begin to beat drums and things like that. In 37 AD, Tiberius Caesar looked out and saw a red aurora. He thought there was a massive fire. So he sent out a lot of troops and soldiers to help fight what he thought was a massive fire to the north. It's also interesting. There's a lot of references in the newspapers and stuff to people having bad omens and bad feelings when they would see auroras. There's also been a lot of fear about some of these space events, even up to the current day. Recently, I saw a book about how solar storms are going to cause an apocalypse and civilization will be destroyed. This book that was purported to be semi-scientific was not science at all. Here's an example of a false article and a belief from 1910. It was claimed that the tail of a comet had poisonous gas. The poisonous gas was seen in an aurora, and when the Earth went through it, mankind would die. But if you took these pills, they would save you. Thousands of bottles of pills were sold. There you go. Dr. Haley's Comet Fever Pills, once in a lifetime confection. And this would protect you from comet fever. Let's talk about some of the storms. 1921, 13th to 15th of May, solar cycle 15, near a sunspot minimum, sparked fires worldwide. In Sweden, they measured, and also in New York, and they measured over 1,000 volts on the telegraph lines. One fire at the Grand Central Terminal had this storm labeled as the New York Railroad Storm. The telegrapher, and they had telegraphers on duty 24 hours a day, was on, and all of a sudden started to see sparks coming out of his telegraph key. And then the papers on the desk caught on fire. He barely had time to grab some papers, grab the other person that was in the other room, and run from the building as it was burned to the ground. This particular sunspot was estimated to be 94,000 miles by 21,000 miles. In Geneva, Switzerland, all of the electric trolley cars came to an immediate stop at the same time. In Sweden, a telephone station, a central office, was completely gutted and burned out. 3 of the major transatlantic cables were damaged. Impacts were felt from all over the world: Australia, Norway, United States. Another one was in 1972. This one was an X class of at least 20 or more. And this solar flare was a white light solar flare, which is fairly rare. It destabilized portions of the North American power grid. On August 4th, 1972, we had a detonation of 50 U.S. naval mines near Haiphong in North Vietnam. Now, what's going on in 1972? The Vietnam War. And so the command of the Navy sent an urgent top priority message to the Pentagon saying that we were being attacked and that mines were being set off to try to sink our ships. By the end of I think it's either 48 or 72 hours, almost 4,000 mines had been exploded. This was kept as for a security reason. It was not available until about, I think, 15 or 20 years ago when this information was released by the military. And here in a second, I have a couple of actual pictures from the Navy at that time period. They eventually found out from a scientist, I believe with the Air Force, that this was probably from the sun and that we were probably not being attacked. And the Navy stood down, but they were on high alert status. This CME's transmit time was 14.6 hours. It's the fastest one that we're aware of. And the storming continued for a few days, and it was very, very bright red color. This is an actual picture that was taken. This is one of the mines that all of a sudden just blew up. And this is another mine that blew up that they took a picture of. Now, I was asked why the mines would explode in a presentation I did this morning. The mines at that time had a magnet inside, as I understand. And when a large mass of metal would go near the mine, it would change those magnetic lines, magnetic influence, and cause the mine to detonate. So when you had a large naval ship go near the mine would explode. Now, when you have this massive storm coming in from the sun, what did we talk about? A lot of energy affecting the magnetic energy, the magnetosphere, and it set those mines off. 1989, this was called the year of the turbulent sun. It's also the peak of cycle 22. We had a major power failure in Quebec, parts of the northeastern US. Over 6 million people were out of service. The Toronto stock market had to close. Radio Free Europe, well, I misspelled that word. I haven't noticed that over the last year. Radio Free Europe thought that the Soviet Union was jamming their signal and reported that back to Washington. And many of the existing satellites at that time were damaged or had to be reset. Between March 6th and March 19th, as we estimate, there was 48 M-class flares and 11 X-class flares. That is just something else. This is a transformer. My understanding is that this transformer was about 6 feet high. After this storm and this energy that came, it was about 2 feet high. And that's what happened to it, just completely melted it. We also have a very, very famous event, one that people quote a lot, and that's the Carrington event. It's one of the largest that we know of in 1859. It reached Earth in 17 hours. And interestingly, it was not Earth directed. We just got a glancing blow from part of this storm. We didn't even get the full effect. It's the first solar flare that was actually recorded. Richard Carrington was an astronomer, and he actually was able to get an image of it. And it was a series of events, not just one. We had the same thing, sparks coming from telegraph machines. There was a lot of literature about tables in different places across the nation where telegraphers were that caught fire or had holes burned in them. Many places tried to measure the electricity, and they measured in excess of 675 volts. The auroras were so bright that birds began to chirp. People got up. A lot of farmers went out to milk the cows, thinking that the sun had risen. Also, there's some very interesting newspaper articles. A lot of people thought the world was ending. Armageddon is here, is what was preached from the pulpit. Many churches opened up at night for people to go in and hear about the end of the world. And pretty much there was not a compass that worked anywhere. This is a picture of a mining settlement. I believe this was in Colorado. And the miners talked about how they got up and went out and thought it was time to go to work. There's another event called, and I'm probably mispronouncing this, but it's called the Mayaki. and it's named after a scientist in Japan at a university there. And these events are 10 to 100 times stronger than the Carrington event. At the time that I made this slide, they were pretty sure that they had found 3 of them, but I was recently reading some more literature, and it looks like they might have found 2 more of them. They do research with tree rings and other things like that. 2024, it's called the Gannon storm. It affected tractors and farmers. Farmers rely so much on GPS that without the GPS, they are pretty much stranded. And we had farmers everywhere in Europe and the United States that could not finish farming because the tractors did not know which direction to go, could not finish plowing, and I'll show something about that on the next slide. Many of the transatlantic domestic flights had to be rerouted because they couldn't get the signals from the satellites. And the thermosphere, and in the atmosphere, we've got different layers: stratosphere, ionosphere, troposphere, etc. The thermosphere heated up to 2,100 degrees. It is normally 1,200 degrees. In fact, it caused the thermosphere to expand. This is from John Deere on May 10th. Sent out to all of their customers, the tractors. We are seeing GPS issues across our entire service area. This is affecting RTK, which is what the program that they use, and levels of GPS. We are trying to determine a resolution. So I actually was on a presentation. Dr. Tamitha Scove talked about this. She's been doing some research in this. And she said John Deere had no idea why they were getting hundreds of phone calls and what was going on until finally a scientist was able to advise them. So here we have an hour and a half later. Please be advised that there is a solar flare and there is space weather activity. This severe storm is the worst since 2005, maybe, and is forecasted to continue throughout the weekend. We have found that the best course of action at this time, shut it off. This will eliminate conflicting corrections that are coming in, and we apologize for the inconvenience. I thought that was quite interesting. Now, let's finish up by talking a little bit about the Earth itself. The magnetic field on the Earth is known as the geomagnetic field. High energy particles will disrupt this magnetic field, and that can give us a tail on the backside. And when I showed you that slide a long time ago with like the solar wind coming in, it's like a rock in a stream. It'll hit the Earth and go around it. And I don't want to go much into it past that because it gets technical very fast. But think of a rock in a stream. Here's an artist's conception of that coming, and you can see it hitting the Earth and then streaming around it. Magnetometer is a device. It measures magnetism so that we can tell if there are changes in it, basically. Now, in ham radio and in other places, we have 2 main indices, an A index and a K index. I'm not going to go into that a lot, but it is used in ham radio, and it shows some of the magnetic fluctuations in our magnetic fields. There are 13 sites that is used for the A and K index. And the K index is measured every 3 hours. And then if you measure all of the sites, it's called a KP or K planetary. If you measure just one site, it's called the K index. It goes from 0 to 9. 0 is quiet, 9 is severe storm. Generally, if you're at 3 or below, you have pretty decent propagation. We have a new mode in ham radio called FT8 that is not affected near as much as some of our other modes. You have an A index. It's every 24 hours. It's 8K readings. This kind of gives us a daily average, and it has a few different numbers. If you're following ham radio or propagation reports, you will see the K and A index reported. Now let's shift to the ionosphere. These are regions. They used to be called layers, but now we think of them more like a region. surrounds the Earth. They have the most density in the center, and the lowest density is at the edges. All regions of the ionosphere have ionization, but each one of the three regions has a different characteristic. They are plasma, and basically, radio waves will go up, and in different regions will be refracted or bent and come back to Earth. For a ham radio operator, this is tremendous because depending upon the angle of refraction, I can sit in my house and easily work China and other places without any problem at all. And other days, just it isn't there. The big controlling factor here is the electron density. How many electrons are there? In the ionosphere, we have a lot of neutral atoms, and it's mainly oxygen, a little bit of nitrogen. They're neutral, so there's no charge that the radio wave will interact with and be refracted. However, when ultraviolet rays go through the ionosphere, they have enough energy, they will pull the electron away from the nucleus, and we now have an ion. The ionization from the Earth, as from the Earth as you go up, the density of those neutral atoms is reduced. The less density, the less of those neutral atoms that you have, the longer it takes for electrons and the positive nucleus to recombine. So let's think about that. So the more neutral atoms that we have, or the density of these atoms, as that's reduced, and as they are split and pulled apart, the higher up you go, the longer it takes for them to recombine, and the longer we have ions and electrons there, and that helps us with our radio wave. As you get closer to the Earth, the sun's energy is weakened and there's less and less ionization. There's an increase in the density of those atoms. It recombines faster and you don't have the ionization. So we have three regions. The D region is the lowest, 40 to 60 miles above the Earth. It's considered a daytime region, and it's usually by 30 minutes after sundown, it's gone. Because it's the closest to the Earth's surface, it has a large density of atoms, causing the ions to rapidly disappear. They go back into a neutral particle. So radio waves here are absorbed rather than refracted. One of our experts in ham radio calls the D region a giant attenuator or an RF sponge. And the higher the frequency, the less that the D layer absorbs. So that means that the lower the frequency, the more the D layer absorbs. So in ham radio, we use 160 meters, 80 meters, and 40 meters. And this is a lower frequency, and therefore the D layer absorbs the energy of that signal. And so for us during the day, using 160, 80, and 40 does not work very well for us at all. The D region has a very, very complex chemistry. I have simplified it tremendously. The next region is the E region. It's thin, 6 miles thick, 60 to 70 miles up. We still have a pretty good density of atoms, so electrons and positive ions will still combine fairly quickly, but it does have some limited propagation for us, and it's kind of unusual to have the E region affect radio signals much after daytime. We have something called a sporadic E. This is 65 miles up, and because it's the same height as the E layer, it's called a sporadic E. It comes and goes irregularly. I've heard them called regions, patches, clouds, but they have a very defined geographical characteristic. They're very thin, and they're about 50 to 100 miles wide. And we think that they're moving up to possibly 200 or 300 miles an hour. For us, on 6 meters, which is about 50 megahertz, We love sporadic E because it can cause some very unusual propagation patterns. It's a lot of fun. What causes sporadic E? Well, metallic ions from meteors, or maybe plasma instability, or disturbed magnetic activity, or all of them. We also have something called TIDs, ionospheric disturbances. I'm not going to get into that in this presentation, but there's been some very interesting research. Dr. Mary Lou West has an excellent presentation where she goes into the Tonga volcano eruption. What was that, 4 years ago? 5 years ago? I don't remember. And how it influenced the ionosphere, that pressure wave that went up. Very interesting research. The last region is the F region. And it goes into an F1 and an F2 during the day. F1 will rise and fall and pretty much follows the sun, disappears at night, kind of similar to the E layer, but still has much better propagation. And usually around noon is when its ionization is maximized. Now, F2 is what we love in ham radio for long range propagation. It exists during the day and into the night. It's the most ionized layer because it has the least density of atoms to recombine. And boy, we love it for DXing in distance. It's in constant state of motion. We've measured in the ionization really goes up just a few minutes before sunrise. And for some reason, it has the most electrons on winter days. I don't think we're going to talk much about that. And I don't think I'm going to go into much about that. This is looking at the Doppler effects from the eclipse. Which eclipse? This is October 14th, 2023. And you'll see the dawn. You'll see radio propagation starting to increase. You'll see the eclipse where it basically disappears. But that's also a topic I'm not going to get into at this point. And you can see the same thing there. RBN is reverse beacon network measuring the radio signals. And you can see where at the top one is 20 meters. And you can see how with the eclipse, the propagation almost disappears. And then as the frequency decreases and the radio wave lengthens, you can see that you have more and more ion activity. So 80 meters, 160 meters, which is generally, that's 3.5 megahertz and 1.8 megahertz. It generally is not active during the day. So if you look on the left side, you'll see almost no activity. Then all of a sudden, you'll see activity during the eclipse, and then again, almost no activity. But those are different presentations. I usually throw it in with some of the ham radio clubs. So that's it that I have. I'm open for questions, and I'm not on Teams a lot, so I'm going to see if I can get out of this. And then Kim, I believe, said that she would have it. Thank you for your time. Hopefully you found at least something in here of interest. And I'm going to try to figure out how to get out of this. It's yours.
All right. Thank you, Ron, for a great talk. I'm just getting my tech dude up here to change seeds so people can see both of us. You can stop sharing your screen if you so
I
desire,
thought I did,
because they
but
don't
no, I
need to
didn't.
see.
Now I did. Okay.
They don't need to see multiple of us. All right. We're into question and answer session, Jeff, and my mic's live. Sorry. I forgot to let him know that we were close to the end. But thank you for the presentation. So I did was gathering the questions that we had online. Uh, one of the first comments I saw that I'm sure will make sense to you, but as not a ham radio operator, didn't make sense to me was from Abiding Ohm's Law, which was CQ KF7ZN day N8NSM D. It was DE.
So what he is saying is CQ is an abbreviation when we are calling somebody. So if you say CQ, if I get on the air and I want to put out my station, I would say CQ, 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 this is KF7ZN. And then I would say, like from Utah, or if I was in some other place, if you're doing Morse code, then you use the letters DE, and the letters DE mean from. So that would be like a communication in Morse code saying CQ, CQ, calling out to Ron, and here's my call sign DE, and with that. So that's what that meant.
Nice. I'm glad you understand. I'm like, I guess it's high. I don't know. Language is interesting, especially when you have to work in abbreviations over, I guess ham radio is a medium that's better suited to abbreviations versus full-on
Oh, it
conversations.
has a ton of them, trust me.
All right. Let's see. And our first question was, are our science instruments that we have able to tell whether a solar wind is a slow wind or a fast wind?
The short answer to that is yes. And the long answer is more technical than I want to get into at this point. But yes, we can measure that because it's slow enough that satellites can do some measuring and some analysis. And our satellites are so sophisticated now. And that slow and fast wind can dramatically affect the speed of a CME heading towards Earth. Can add to it, can increase its energy, speed it up, slow it down, and so that that's definitely affected by that speed. And yes, we can get an idea on it. We can also take from when the satellite saw it leave the sun to when it hit our planet, and then calculate how fast it was going as well.
All right. And our next question is, what is the longest DX contact you had with the lowest power?
Oh wow! Now
Eh,
that I've never been asked that question. I run full legal limit. I have an amplifier that will go 1,500 watts. Obviously, with that, I can punch through what we call a pile up when there's a lot of ham radio operators. We have a mode called FT8. I don't really care for it, but it's great for the hobby. One day I was doing some stuff with my radio, and I wanted to do some things with this FT8 mode. So I turned my radio down to 1/4 of 1 watt, thinking nobody's going to hear me. And I put out a CQ testing some different parameters, and all of a sudden I had a operator come back from Connecticut, and I was like, "You have got to be kidding me that he heard me." And in ham radio terms, it's called QRP, really low power. I don't usually deal with that, but that a fourth of a watt hit Connecticut. I have no idea how far it went. I wasn't looking at my RBN, but that was probably the lowest power and the farthest away, and absolutely surprised me. I thought maybe somebody, one of my friends here in Utah, was playing games with me, but no, I looked it up, and the operator really was on, and he really was in Connecticut. So that's my answer to that question.
Uh, there was a follow-up on that. Was that during a sunspot activity time?
I don't remember. It was about a year and a half ago. I honestly don't remember. It was during the day.
All right. Uh, I shot back at him since they were requesting that information of you. Well, what was yours? And apparently, uh, he had he was in the Midwest US and his farthest was to London using 10 watts.
So that would be about equivalent
So,
to what I was doing. And 10 watts will get you pretty far if you have a good antenna.
uh, right. And our next question, is a solar flare just the energy, or does it have like a visible uh body or mass where if you were in space and not going to actually get hit by this, would you just see like a wave of light going by?
Keeping this again non-technical, it's energy. It's magnetic, it's energy. It has very little actual mass to it. If it went by you and if you didn't have protection, it would fry your circuitry. When we have some of these massive ones and we have any kind of warning, my understanding from Dr. Scove is that the astronauts on the space station actually have to get into a safe room. Um, and so you would not see like, oh, here comes this energy, but all of your instruments, satellites, and everything else would definitely see that amount of energy. We're protected because usually a lot of it is absorbed. However, if it's massive enough, it gets through, as you saw in the 1921 and 1972 and others.
Neat. All right. And people in chat, if there's any questions, especially if there are follow-up questions, do feel free to pop those in chat for us. Our next question was, if there was another Carrington event or whatnot, would cell phones that have like the wireless charging be able to charge just like sitting there out in the open, or would they just be fried?
So that's a good question. Um, the the cell phone has such a small antenna and small electrical circuitry that it's not going to be affected. The reason you see the effect from some of these massive things like in Ontario and Telegraph and all that is you have thousands of miles of electrical wire. You have massive transformers. You have electrical wires with the ground underneath. You have a massive area so that this large amount of energy from the sun can disrupt it, increase the power as we saw in the slides. But something small like a phone is not going to have enough of an imprint that we would not expect it to be affected. No.
But I would imagine in that event it would affect the other infrastructure that is not the phone.
Absolutely.
So
Um,
it would definitely have an effect, just not
when we
physically.
had Hurricane, I think it was Irma, we had a large CME and some solar flares, and many of the rescue people lost their ability to use their cell phones and to communicate with their radios, fire and EMS and stuff like that, because of this storm that came in. Now, it wasn't a major one like some of the others I showed you, but it was enough that it did affect the emergency efforts for about 36 hours. So, yeah, you're going to have satellites. I think it was the storm in 2024. I'm trying to remember where we lost. Oh, I'm trying to remember the numbers now, but I think it was like 50 satellites we lost because of their effect on them. And there's a lot of concern these days because so many of the satellites that have been sent up by the businesses and not by the scientists do not have a lot of shielding and protection, and they are more susceptible than some of our other satellites, like those, put up by NASA and stuff like that. And they are more susceptible to those energies. What I don't want to have anybody take away from this is a doomsday, run home and put on your tinfoil hat. But yeah, it definitely affects infrastructure, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Follow up on my end for that. When there is an event and it is affecting radios and whatnot, uh, do emergency services have a workaround for that, or how do they work around
They
that?
didn't used to. my understanding is that there's a lot being done with this, and there's a new infrastructure being put up. I think it was AT&T got the contract. Don't quote me on that, but there's a lot of work being done with that to try to mitigate it. And of course, for power grids, the power companies have been investing quite a bit of money and time into having power grids that can be protected. There was a massive one in Australia. I think it was the 2024, but where a power grid was drastically affected, and a lot of people out of service, and it took a while to get it back up.
All right. So let's see. Our next question that I see, let me just scroll here a little bit, is the KP that you mentioned, which is the sum of all the K index things, is that the same as the KP they refer to when we're getting the aurora forecasts on like the news?
Yes, yes. If it's from like NOAA, spaceweather.com, NASA, some of those places, yeah, that's the same thing. The reason I glossed over that a little bit is because that's really, in my experience, of more interest to ham radio operators than the astronomy clubs, and so I didn't really go into a lot of detail. But yes, and one thing I'll throw out right now with that question is, with some of the newest research in ham sci, we have actually had some engineers and scientists that have now developed backyard magnetometers, something that could have never been done before. So we are deploying in houses that have the right yard and the right things, magnetometers, so that we can have a lot of reporting stations. And there's actually a couple of scientists that are overseeing it, that are involved, and it's a very significant and interesting project that's going on with some funding and grants. And I forget who it was. I think it's the Tucson group was helping with it. But yeah, we have 13 sites, and that's because that's what was there originally. And so that's always been our base to go on. But now we have many, many more for the first time ever. And we've got more and more people that are being willing to get the magnetometers from Hamsci, bury them in their yard. I don't remember how deep, 30 inches or something. Run your cable into your house and give constant 24-hour a day readings and more information on magnetometers. Long answer to a short question.
Neat. Uh, one of our viewers actually said Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T all have first responder backup networks
Okay.
now.
I know they didn't
So,
when that hurricane hit, and I know that I think it was FEMA granted some some money and worked with the phone companies on that. So thanks. I knew there was something going on, but
yeah, it's one of those things where there's so much information and your brain possibly can't hold it
yeah.
all. I know that feeling very acutely. Um, I I want to say, and I'm sure one of my tech guys will correct me if I'm wrong, that UACNJ hosts one of those magnetometers or had. I got told yes,
Oh,
we do
great.
do
That's
have
an area
one.
that I'm not that active in Hamsci. I'm just very aware of it and have been kind of following it, but I don't know the details really with it.
Yeah. I am also an amateur and I'm definitely not on the tech side of astronomy, so I unfortunately also don't know the details. I do have a one of those passing knowledges of, oh yes, I'll hold on to this piece of knowledge and use it for trivia later.
Yeah, so I was
Sort of
asked to do a
brains.
presentation to, I think it was a college club, Dartmouth, someplace on the East Coast, a major university. And I, at that point, was just barely doing astronomy clubs. And so I didn't do my little spiel that I did on this one. And the first question, I literally, at the third word, had no clue what this person was asking. I mean, I was in outer space, didn't understand any of the words, did not understand the question, and I looked so foolish. And I just said, I am so sorry. I have no idea what you just asked me. And that's when I started giving my little thing at the beginning saying, I am not a scientist. I am just somebody trying to help educate a little bit and have fun, but I am not a scientist. So
And e- we, I mean, we've had some scientists, and even then, there's always the disclaimer, science is massive. And you can get very specialized where, you know, even a science like geology or whatnot, you know, there are so many different things you could be studying that you could be very well versed in sedimentary rocks and how different formations and where that's from, but igneous is just like, eh.
but there's always a place if you're interested. I'm a nurse, but I love
So,
science. And I found a very receptive group in Hamsci, and I have learned a ton over the last few years, been involved in their research, and people like Dr. Mary West have involved me and said, now, can you do this? Can you examine this data? Can you do these things with it? If not, I'm going to teach you how. And so if an old man that's a nurse can get into some of these science projects, anybody can get in if you have a passion and an interest. And that includes the wonderful hobby of ham radio.
right. And oh, I missed a question. Uh, Someone said an unrelated question to your presentation today, but they heard there was a that HamSci had a meteor scatter event that was back in December. How did that go?
It went great. They're still analyzing the data. What they do with that, and I actually was in that part of that meteor scatter. A little bit of a background. We can bounce radio when a meteor goes through the sky. It will leave an ionized trail, and we can bounce a signal off of that ionized trail. We have a very tight time frame within which to do it. There is a very specialized mode. I think it's MSK14. I'd have to double check. I hadn't done anything with it. I got interested. I got on and really had fun. Made some contacts, bouncing signals off of the meteor trail. And so, in order to do more research, we invited all ham radio operators to get onto Meteor Scatter, to learn about Meteor Scatter, and then to be involved in doing Meteor Scatter. And so, we had two of them. We had one, I think it was in September. I couldn't be in that one when there was a lot of meteors coming through a meteor shower. And then we had the one in December with, again, a lot of meteors and a meteor shower. So that's what that was all about. And then we're analyzing the data, and there are some people going through that to see how it affects the ionosphere, how it affects propagation.
All right. I'm going to ask in chat if you guys have any questions. Do get those in. I do. I don't want to monopolize too much time, but I am going to give you guys a few minutes to get any last minute questions in because stream delay is a thing. Uh, so, uh, while I'm waiting for that, just want to check that I didn't miss any more questions. Um, like I said, thank you, Ron, for such a great presentation. Uh, if people are interested in any of the topics, is there a place they should reach out to, uh, whether you personally or just an organization? I know there is someone in chat who's obviously a ham radio
Right.
operator themselves, so
I would say, depending upon which topic, if you're interested in ham radio, I would find a club, a local club close. Most of them will teach classes. They will have testing sessions to help you get your FCC license for ham radio. If you're in ham radio and you're interested in doing DXing that I love or county hunting, contact me because there are websites dedicated to those. If you're interested in science and want to do more, I would highly encourage HamSci, HAMSCI. go to their website, just post on, and one of us will see that you're asking about it. And we have a Thursday meeting every Tuesday with HamSci, with people that get on. We have presentations, questions, welcoming new members. We have people from all the way from Mongolia to Egypt to England to the United States. We have some graduate students, some full professors, some lay people like myself that get on. If you're looking at science and NASA citizen science, if you get on the NASA website, there are a lot of other citizen science projects going from the oceans to helping to monitor Jupiter to a lot of different things besides HamSci. So there is a lot of opportunities, a lot of websites, and if all else fails, you are so welcome to email me, and I will try to help you go in the direction you're trying to go.
All right. There was a question, is the meeting on premises or is it on the air? How would they join that?
Which meeting?
I'm assuming the
The
ham
HamSci
sci
meeting?
meeting.
If you reach out on the HamSci website, Gary will send you an invite. If you have problems with that and you email me, I will get you an invite or have Gary send you one.
All right.
And it's on Zoom.
Perfect. That's the one I've been in and that I went, ooh, I like these people. Let me see how many I can grab for talks. So that's where I
Oh
got
yeah,
you.
that's right. That's right. I remember that now.
I was like, I like this one. Let's bring that over here. um, Sometimes you have to go shopping for presenters, so I did throw the HamSci website out in chat for people. Uh, do you, what is your email, or just have them reach out through the HamSci
If you
website?
go through, if you go to qrz.com, it will have my email address there.
Perfect. And I also put that in chat for people should they desire it. All right. So it looks like we are at the end of our questions. Once again, thank you,
My
Ron,
pleasure.
for a great
Thank
presentation.
you for the
Thank you,
invite.
everyone who's joined us on both Twitch and YouTube. If you came in a little late, don't worry. We do keep these presentations saved on our YouTube channel. So you can go on YouTube, scroll back if you're like, man, I wish I remembered that bit of information. Don't worry, you can still find it. Uh, Rewatch it. There are also other we like I said, we have all our other presentations saved there. Uh, do hit those like, follow, subscribe, the free actions for everything. Um, it does help us get the word out and helps us reach more people. As always, United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey uh, is a nonprofit. If you want to do more, feel free. We have a Patreon. All that information is on our website, uacnj.org. And like I said, our social media is a great place to keep in touch with us and find out what we're doing that week. Uh, it's middle January now, so April's fast approaching when we will once again resume our on-site presentations. Uh, we also just booked our booth slot for NEAF, the Northeast Astronomy Forum. So if you happen to be attending there, do feel free to stop by and say hi. And with that, I want to wish everyone a great night, clear skies, and good seeing.